Niacin, or vitamin B3, has earned a place of both quiet importance and quiet controversy in the landscape of public health nutrition. It's one of the few vitamins that can claim a heroic past, curing pellagra in the early 20th century, and a complicated present, where it's used in both dietary fortification and pharmacological doses, and increasingly scrutinized for its dual potential to support cellular health or subtly tip the balance toward inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. As more data emerge from large-scale epidemiological studies like NANS, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, and long-term cohort trials, the public health case for moderate niacin intake has never been more important or more nuanced. At the core, niacin is indispensable. It fuels the production of NAD, a molecule required for mitochondrial function, DNA repair, oxidative metabolism, and inflammation regulation. Without enough of it, energy systems falter, skin and digestive issues arise, and severe deficiency leads to pellagra, something most developed countries haven't seen in decades, thanks largely to widespread grain fortification. But like many nutrients, the pendulum has swung from too little to potentially too much, especially in populations consuming high levels of fortified foods or taking niacin-containing supplements without clinical indication. The data tell a cautious but compelling story. In NANS analyses and cohort studies tracking niacin intake over years or decades, a U-shaped curve begins to emerge, where both low and high intakes are associated with greater all-cause mortality, while moderate intakes appear to offer protection. At the lower end, intakes under 15 milligrams per day correlate with higher rates of metabolic syndrome markers, inflammation, and even early mortality. But on the high end, above 40 to 50 milligrams daily, some studies note an increased incidence of insulin resistance, hepatic strain, and even elevated inflammatory markers like CRP, particularly in individuals with pre-existing metabolic dysfunction. This is not trivial, considering the average American now consumes niacin not just from whole foods like poultry, fish, and legumes, but also from an increasing array of fortified products, breakfast cereals, energy bars, synthetic vitamins added to processed foods, and over-the-counter B-complex supplements. For many, total intake can easily exceed 30 to 40 milligrams daily, often without their awareness. And while that may not cause immediate harm, the slow accumulation of metabolic stress over years, in the form of subtle inflammation, disrupted glucose homeostasis, and altered lipid profiles, can make the difference between healthy aging and chronic disease onset. It's in this gray zone that public health policy must tread carefully. Eliminating deficiency must remain a priority, especially in vulnerable populations such as the elderly, pregnant individuals, and those with malabsorptive conditions. But blanket fortification and unregulated supplementation may no longer be justified in a one-size-fits-all model. Instead, the emerging data suggest an optimal population-wide intake target of 16 to 20 milligrams per day for adults, adjusted slightly upward for pregnancy and lactation. This range is sufficient to prevent deficiency and support NAD homeostasis, while remaining well below thresholds where adverse effects have been observed in long-term follow-up studies. Rather than discouraging niacin intake, the goal should be to steer it back into a physiological sweet spot through food-first strategies that emphasize nutrient density over enrichment. Public messaging should shift from more is better to enough is enough, highlighting the best whole food sources of niacin, such as poultry, tuna, peanuts, mushrooms, and brown rice. These foods deliver niacin in its natural matrix, often accompanied by complementary nutrients that modulate its absorption and use. In contrast, synthetic niacin added to ultra-processed foods or taken in isolation may bypass those checks and balances, potentially contributing to unintended metabolic effects. There's also a growing argument for screening and stratification, especially as personalized nutrition becomes more viable. Those with insulin resistance, liver disease, or kidney dysfunction may need to limit high-dose niacin exposure, while others with genetic polymorphisms affecting NAD synthesis might require more. Ultimately, a moderate baseline for the population, paired with individualized adjustments for those at either end of the spectrum, offers the best balance of safety and benefit. In the long view, niacin represents the kind of nutrient that forces us to rethink how we define adequate and excessive. It invites us to move beyond survival-based deficiency prevention toward longevity-oriented optimization. And it reminds us that nutrients are not inherently good or bad. They are contextual tools to be dosed with care, shaped by evolving evidence, and guided by public health policies that prioritize balance over blanket solutions. If the goal is not just to survive but to thrive into old age, then the case for moderate niacin intake is clear. Not too little, not too much, just enough to support the complex orchestration of cellular health, metabolic resilience, and graceful aging that modern public health must now aim to protect.